All right, we're back on with Joe Quattrucci, who is the Director of Productivity for KCN Worldwide here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we're going to talk a little bit with Joe about how his productivity model works for getting new agents into production as quickly as possible and how he helps market centers to be able to achieve that same goal. So, Joe, talk a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so at most Keller Williams market centers, there's a productivity coach who's responsible for training and coaching the newest licensed agents into production, into business.
Okay.
And I think that it's a really great model, and I love that Keller Williams has taken so much time and attention into training and coaching. What I have found is that some of those coaches aren't exactly sure how to set up their program. They're not exactly sure what resources to give to their agents or in what order. As we know, there's a lot to learn in real estate, and you certainly can't learn it overnight.
Right.
We need to be able to deliver it to agents in a way that they can absorb it and they can implement it without feeling overwhelmed by it.
Okay.
And so what I've done is I've taken what I believe to be the most important real estate fundamental strategies, concepts, and ideas, and I've broken them down. And the first thing I want to do is build it into an online training course.
Okay.
This gives access to agents on demand. Whether they have a second job or a family, whatever their schedule is, they can now learn and be trained on the fundamentals of real estate 24 hours a day through video and downloadable attachments in a written text workbook.
Okay.
So that's kind of step number one. Once we provide that basic level of training to any agent, that's where the coach's job really comes in. Any quality coach is going to engage with that agent at a high level, ask them questions, move them forward, hold them accountable to their own goals. And so what I've been doing with market centers is providing the coach some of these training tools and resources so that they can provide the basic level of training to their agents while simultaneously providing that coach administrative support, which means marketing, recruiting, tracking, onboarding, reporting, so that they can focus on being a coach.
I want to touch on something here that you just brought up now. You know this. Many people out there may not know. I was a productivity coach myself. I had 55 agents that I was coaching. And a lot of the services that you just discussed were the biggest obstacles for me, okay, which was the administrative support, the accountability for me as a coach. Even having my own coach wasn't the same as having all of the systems tracking and everything done and supporting the market center through recruiting it the same way. There's only so many hours in a day. So
right.
I think that's an important part because many, especially in the Keller Williams world, many productivity coaches are asked to help in the recruiting process.
Sure.
So let's address that.
Well, and they want to recruit to the market center because they're recruiting to their own program.
They're recruiting to their own income stream in a couple different levels.
Sure. But it's a catch-22 because it's like I have 55 agents that are relying on me and they're not all selling as many houses as they could be.
Yep.
But I need to also fill my future pipeline with future income.
So how do you balance that? So
right.
I love this concept.
Yes, and so that's where I think what I'm doing, productivity coaching expansion, really is kind of helping fill that gap. I want to keep the coach focused on their 20%, which I believe is interactions with agents, talking to agents, and coaching agents. Mm-hmm. That is where the rubber meets the road in the coaching world. High-level, high-quality conversations. Now, like you said, a coach only has so many hours in a day. So my goal is to take off as much responsibility from that coach's plate as possible because in an ideal world, they would show up to work and their only job would be talking to agents. I assist with all.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
That would be an ideal world.
And that would include.
So how do we get there?
Yeah. Well, that includes recruiting, right? Mm-hmm. So they show up to the recruiting appointment, but they're not necessarily cold calling. They're not having to track everything. They're not having to manage all the follow-up systems. They're just showing up for the recruiting appointment.
So, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
Again, you're catching things that catch my ears.
Sure.
So you will actually go out and do the prospecting and set the appointments for the recruits, and the coach just has to go and have the recruiting appointment?
That's right. We do it specifically for the coach because we want to fill that coach's business with more potential quality agents, mm-hmm. and we want them to vet them out at the local level, but we don't want them spending so much time to fill their own schedule. We want them just showing up and then spending 99% of their time on their existing agents.
One question that I know is going to run through some OP and TL's heads is, do those agents and coaches that you support have to be part of KCN, or is this something that is open to the whole Keller platform?
Yeah, great question. So it is not specific to KCN in that sense. the matter of fact, I think that the coaching programs really should be positioned as the Market Center coaching program. So, for example, here at Keller Williams Arizona Realty, it's the KWAS coaching program.
Okay.
It's not the coaches coaching program or some separate entity. I think that separation can create confusion. I think we frame it as this is the coaching program that is part of the Market Center because Keller Williams understands the importance of training and coaching. And so as far as what I do, the agents don't even necessarily need to know who PCX is. I'm really more behind the curtain with the coach on the front of the stage, acting and performing as the head coach. I'm really more in the support role, providing the coach with the resources they need to train their agents, providing them with the leverage they need to coach their agents, and then again, helping with the marketing, the tracking, the reporting, et cetera.
Excellent. And how did you come to realize this gap inside of this opportunity, if you will, inside the productivity coaching world?
Well, because I was a productivity coach, and I said, and this, honestly, John, this is what happened. I started reaching out for help when I took on the position, and Keller Williams is a culture of people that want to support you, and I had a ton of people that wanted to support me and that did support me. But what I found was everybody that gave me a resource, I had to still go recreate it. They would give me a PDF or a printout or some paper document, and I'd have to still go build my own. And so what I started doing was building everything in editable format so they could very easily sort of white label everything I've created.
Okay.
So as soon as I get into business with a Market Center, I take my trunk chest of tools, if you will. I clear off my logo and face and contact information, add that new Market Centers and coaches, and now they're in operation almost overnight. And I didn't have that. It took me a year to really build all of that stuff and to really fail forward day after day after day, figuring it all out. And so I decided I wanted to be able to share my resources with others. And again, because KW is such a collaborative environment, I found that coaches actually did want to collaborate. And so I said, well, why don't I just start creating a platform where I control that collaboration? I control the mastermind. And along the way, I can also provide them with additional support. And so one thing sort of led to another. And the concept everybody seemed to love. So when I moved out here to join Kristen Cole, she had me start in her first 2 Market Centers here in Arizona.
Okay.
We've had enormous growth the last 2 years. We're talking about 400% increase in company dollar.
Directly related to the coaching program.
Yes, and I give the coach here, Jackie, the credit for that. And that was under, I think that she was able to get up and running much faster because of, I saved her 2 years of figuring out.
Now, 400% increase, it doesn't even matter where the number started because that is pure profit. Those are all agents that most likely weren't going to be contributing to the bottom line at the office anyhow. So that's absolutely fantastic. Now, one of the things, trick question, by the way, this is all unscripted. We have no idea how this is going to roll here. We always talk about building something that's scalable inside of Keller.
Right.
So you've been doing this now for 2 years. Okay. How many Market Centers do you have now as clients?
So I was just with Kristen's Market Centers for about the first 8 or 9 months when I came to Arizona. At that point, I took on my second, technically my third location. And over the past year, I'm now up to 8 locations.
Okay.
So we've been building fairly slowly, honestly. We've been strictly word of mouth at this point. And I've really been intentional about not taking on more than I have bandwidth to support. I set up my compensation model so I only get paid when what I say is going to work actually works.
Okay.
And I do that because I understand this is a new concept and I want to prove to TLs and OPs that this concept can work.
It's a contingency plan. Just like selling a house, you don't get paid until it closes.
Right.
Same concept.
Right. I'm sort of in it with the Market Center. I look at it as very much of a partnership between me, the Market Center, and the coach because we all want the same thing. And what I've also, part of what I do is we have a quarterly meeting with the coach and with the entire Market Center leadership team to talk about progress. What are we seeing that's working? What's not working that we need to adjust? What are our priorities moving forward? This is very much a collaboration because we all want the same thing.
Right.
It's just a matter of figuring out the mechanics behind it.
Okay. So some of the takeaways that I got from our conversation is a complete platform that's white label. So the Market Centers can create their own program, which is really an interesting concept. And I like where you went with that. Most coaching programs is a separate entity. Now, it might be an agent inside the office like I was, but it's a separate entity that is in collaboration with the Market Center. However, if there's a change in leadership, either the Market Center or the coach moves on, that business no longer continues.
Yes.
And that's a big challenge.
Yes. And just real quick on that note, that's already shown up several times over the last year where, let's say, the coach was either moving on to a higher position or a different position, or maybe even going back into sales. Mm-hmm. Now the market center, to your point, has this gap. They're like, what do we do? And what typically happens is you get a new coach with new ideas and you start back over.
Yeah,
and this happens every year or two. And so now what I've been able to do with, again, the support of Market Center ownership and leadership is, hey, now that your coach, we have this vacancy, I'm going to step in and step up, and I'll even cover some of your group coaching calls while you identify the next right coach. And as soon as we identify that person, I will plug them into the existing system so that they are caught up to speed in the next 30 days. And meanwhile, your agents will continue to be onboarded. They'll continue to have access to the online training course. I'll continue to help cover the group coaching calls. And so there's not this gap and there's not this starting over from scratch. I'm continuing to send the leadership reports on a weekly and monthly basis and quarterly basis. And so none of that stops. It kind of continues. And again, when the new coach comes in, we're now off to the races much faster than starting back from scratch.
That's phenomenal, because I have not found a coaching program, and I've been involved with a few of them. I have not found a coaching program that operates like that. That's fantastic. So, Joe, last question. You had mentioned earlier that you've been at a slow ramp-up point. Where do you see yourself in a year or 3 years for a number of market centers that you can take on and be able to service at this level?
Well, now I'm making my goals very public, so that's the accountability piece.
Absolutely. Speak it.
Perfect. I would, so I think we're ready for our next growth phase. We've got a strong administrative support team. We've really focused in on our standard operating procedures over the last year. We've really honed in on our systems, and we're creating a consistent result. So with that being said, I'm ready to take on 5 to 10 market centers in the next 3 to 6 months for sure. I'd like to see myself at 20 to 25 by the end of 2022. And the long game, honestly, is 100 market centers.
Okay.
And maybe more. Who knows? Keller Williams has over 800 market centers just in the United States, and I know most of those have coaching programs, and I know some of them are operating at enormously successful rates, and many of them are not.
Yep.
And so I think 100 is a very reasonable number to think I can accomplish. And why that number is important, it's less about how many clients I'm serving, and it's more about how many coaches are contributing to the community of coaches that are determining the best practices of productivity coaching inside of Keller Williams. And what I mean by that is part of what I do is have a bi-weekly group meeting where we as a team will ask an important question: what is the best way to X, right? Fill in the blank. And then we will go test it, and we will go get feedback, and then we'll come back together and compare our results. And as a group, we want to hone in on the best practices as it pertains to onboarding, as it pertains to coaching, as it pertains to accountability, and really collaborate. And so when we get to 100 coaches, if we had 1 out of 8 Keller Williams market centers working together in collaboration, I really think that we can get to the point where we've honed in and identified best practices, and it will never be perfect. It will never be one size fits all, but I believe that we can drastically reduce the attrition rate and increase retention and company dollar.
I love that. So you're testing, refining, and like you said, you're never going to get it 100% right, because nobody really knows what that looks like. In any business, not just the PC world, but in anything.
Right.
What's perfect look like? Nobody.
Right.
It's really not attainable. But if you can get to that 75 to 80% efficiency, like Gary Keller talks about, if you can be 80% efficient, your world will change.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is going to absolutely change the world in the PC world.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate that.
Joe, thanks again for your time. And again, OPs and TLs, you're going to find Joe's information on the bottom here. And we thank you again for listening and watching. Have a great day, guys.